All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to another webinar episode here with us at Biohacks. And today I have a wonderful, wonderful guest, which is very, very dear to me, which is Dr. Engelman. And Dr. Engelman has mentored me for a bit, and he's become somebody I call when I have an issue or two. But he is also the director of Cyrex Laboratories. So, Dr. Engelman, I just want to thank you today for being here with us. And I would love if you told our viewers a little bit of who you are, what you do, and why you chose this career path.
All righty, Dr. D, it's a pleasure to be on with you.
Thank you.
I'm a big supporter and fan of yours. I think you've done a great job, and this is not easy to do what you've done. So you and your group are to be complimented because I think you've done it the right way, and I'm happy to be affiliated with you because you're a straight up guy, and I like that.
Thank you.
My history is that I was from a medical family. My father was an internal medicine doc and a professor who worked until he was 92 years old.
Oh, wow.
Because he wanted to. I mean, he loved it. He just loved it. And I know I inherited those genes because I feel just like him, and I don't see myself, just quitting one day. It's just too much fun. And so I grew up in Ohio, went to Ohio State for undergraduate with a Bachelor of Science degree. I went to Ohio State Medical School, and then came out west to get out of the Midwest weather and came to Phoenix, Arizona, and did my residency in internal medicine with a big teaching hospital here. Got interested in the emergency medicine. I was sort of a thrill seeker. So emergency medicine is where those people go. So I started doing that, working with the group, then was named chairman and director of the department 2 years later, and remained the director for 25 years of a big teaching hospital and the top neurological institute, private in the world.
Wow.
So I did that and was interested in cardiology. I became president of the Heart Association in the local chapter, and then decided that and got done with that part of my life. That's a young man's game. And then got interested in stem cells. And once they got discovered, it seems like they've been around forever, but they haven't. They're pretty recent. And the concept was, what is a stem cell and a cell that can become anything when it grows up? How does it know what to be? I mean, how does it know whether to be a nerve or a bone, or doesn't have a mom and dad to tell it what to be? So how does that work? Well, it turned out that there was a fellowship from the integrative medicine community, the only one that they've ever had, actually. And 21 of us from all over the world went to that and got a fellowship certified in stem cell medicine. And then so I have a certification in that, and I have a certification in integrative medicine, anti-aging integrative medicine.
That is a wonderful, wonderful life experience in medicine. And
one other quick thing. And then I fortunately was asked by two presidential administrations to be the doctor for two presidents during their term in office when they were in the area, the airspace of Arizona and the surrounding space. So they had the red phone and would go and, talk to everybody and go have a special place in case he got hospitalized. And I would tell you who those two presidents were, but then I'd have to kill myself. So I'm not going to.
Yeah, let's not do that. Yeah, I didn't even know that part about you. Wow, that's super interesting. And all those walks of life that you've had in your scientific path as a doctor, scientist, right? I guess led you to the point where you are now. And for those of you listening to us, I've spent a good amount of time speaking to Dr. Engelman, and I'm telling you, as a person, I have a I know enough about this stuff to be a little dangerous, right? But when I sit down with Dr. Engelman, I always learn. And the amalgamation of everything you've done, why did you choose to study the immune system in depth and at this, like, let's say, culminating point in your career? Because I call you anything as it relates to immune system, and just for our viewers to understand. So at Cyrex, I'm going to say we, because we get labs with you guys all the time, but we do pathogen studies, leaky gut studies, blood-brain barrier studies, chemical studies to see what chemicals can be inside the person, food sensitivities, and so why is this an area that excited you after so many cool things that you've done? Why the study of the immune system like this? Why study, let's say, inflammation to this level?
It was that's a great question. I'm the type of person that doesn't. I'm not that great at memorizing, and I don't like to memorize. And I don't think if you memorize something, it doesn't mean that you have a good knowledge of it. It just means that you memorized it. So when I was, practicing internal medicine or in the emergency department, and I'd see these things come up, and they'd say, well, here's what you have, here's your medication, and good luck.
Right.
And I thought, this just can't. There's got to be another way to do this. This didn't just happen. And there's an interesting expression of a Stephen Hawking's, who everybody knows who that is.
Right.
But in one of his books, the thing that stayed with me is he had this expression is nothing happens for no reason. And I've never forgotten that.
Right.
You
Yeah.
may not know what it is, but nothing happens for no reason. And so slowly but surely, once I got involved in the stem cell thing, it opened my eyes as to pathways of how things develop and how everybody is subject to their environment, and whether it's aging pathways or somebody who didn't have cancer a year ago and does now, what is that pathway? Something must have changed. And so I wasn't sick before, and now I am. So it became, I got to find out if there's information about these pathways. Number one, because I'm frustrated of just writing prescriptions, and and the other is maybe I could do something about it so that it either wouldn't happen, or if it was happening, maybe I could mitigate it and maybe turn it back the other way, or at least calm it down. So, and immunology is the key to everything now. Everybody talks about immunology. That's the most fascinating subject. And if you don't, I tell people, if you want to practice medicine, if you don't know immunology, you ought to think about retiring.
Yes.
Because it's the key to everything that you can imagine: neurodegenerative disease, arthritis, cancer. It's all immunology. So I hate to admit it, but maybe it's because of my age, but I'm actually have dreams about immunology now. Didn't always that way, but it is now.
Right. Right. And more and more people now start to talk. You hear the word inflammation and so forth, and people really are coming up with newer terms to describe what they're feeling, etc. But today I wanted to kind of take a deep dive into the science of what we do. And I think it's important just to really first understand. Well, let's start with like a bird's eye view, let's say. And what is a overactive immune system, right? Because I guess that's kind of where things start, right? Where your immune system starts to get to work.
Yeah,
What
that's a great question. I used to do a radio show, and used to like to throw out questions so people would jog their minds. And one of the questions was, is inflammation a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, yeah, very good question.
And there is an expression in French called "ça dépend," which means it all depends.
Right.
You're going after a pathogen that's trying to kill you, it's a great thing
Right.
because that's what we use to kill pathogens.
Right.
If it's going wild and the pathogen's gone, and that same thing that you used to kill a pathogen is still turned on, then it can be a very damaging thing. So it all depends what the context is, and so that's really essentially the immune system. And the one thing that they've talked a lot about now is what's called immune exhaustion. Yeah, it's a term that didn't was very rarely used before, but now it's everywhere. And it's what they're using now for some of these cancer immunotherapies that work for 2 months and then all of a sudden they don't work anymore. And
Right.
it's because they were depending on the immune system, our own immune system, which has the ability to go after cancer cells and kill them. It gets tired and
Right.
it just wears out and doesn't work well, and then gets so tired that it goes, I'm even going to make things that will make you leave me alone and not bother me anymore, which is those checkpoint things that everybody's talking about. So the key is basically to have the immune system working and working the way it's supposed to, but not overworking because eventually it gets worn out. I frequently see these arrays, like we have an array that looks at pathogens, and I'll see 5 pathogens frequently all glommed together in the same area. But then you look at the herpes, like the herpes family, and all of a sudden the herpes are elevated. And you go, what does that have to do with her? Why is herpes elevated, reactivated? And the answer, because I've been going after these pathogens for so long that I'm exhausted. And I'm the guy who's been keeping your cold sore from coming back on your lip, by the
Right.
way. And when I used to get it, which I did when I was younger and in medical school and living a crazier life, I always knew why I got the cold sore came back because I was a wreck and my immune system was a wreck. And so that's what a lot of this stuff is about. So you got your inflammation on one end, and then you got immune exhaustion on the other end. And you just can't keep beating that horse over and over again, or you're going to get effects that are not going to be very pleasant.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of burning the candle at both ends, right?
No doubt.
Right. And it's crazy to me sometimes, how many of the ailments we have nowadays in our environment, or diseases, properly said, that have their, well, like you were saying when you were in emergency medicine, and nothing happens for a reason, right? You started to think, according to Stephen Hawking's mantra there, when you start to dig deep into why a lot of these diseases are occurring, inflammation and exhaustion of the immune system, et cetera, are very big pillars of why these things happen. They're huge,
Yeah.
and yet we're at a superficial level of trying to care for these diseases. As far as I know, there's about 12,000 documented diseases right now, which that number is wild. Like I did some digging the other day, and that's the number I kind of came up with. So about 12,000 documented diseases. I mean, there's no clinician that can. You said you don't like memorizing. Well, memorize how to diagnose, treat, and so forth. But I've something I've been saying for some time, that what are the pillars that cause these diseases, and one of them, I would say, is inflammation. The other, oxidative stress. The other one, glycation issues with sugar, and the other one, submethylation. So once you start to look at more of the pillars of what is causing the problem, right? And we tend to think that way with anything. If your AC breaks in the house, we're kind of, hey, what caused that? Or if we have a leak, and what's causing the leak? We're not, if we have a leak in the roof, we're just not going to put a patch there. We're going to try to figure out what pipe burst, or is it the AC, or what, root cause analysis. So inflammation is huge, and that's when one has to look at immunology. But so let's dig a little deeper. So what could be causing that immune system to be overactive or cause this immune exhaustion? So that's kind of when we get to a term that I learned actually with you guys, physical triggers of immune response, and what are these things in our environment? What is there? What's the bad guy to the immune system? What's making him actually work so hard?
Well, if you go through them, and I wrote some down so I didn't forget any pathogens, the job of the immune system, its main job, is to prevent things from outside getting inside and killing us. That's its job. That's
Right.
that's it's formed. And those things that would kill us used to be pathogens.
Right.
Well, pathogens haven't changed, except, they've evolved some, and now we got COVID, which is a whole new thing. But what's new is chemicals, additives to food and drinks, toxins in the air, all the stuff we're spewing out all over the place.
Right.
And then stress, which is huge. And then with the iPhones and everything else, so you can never turn off the world. And also physical damage, like if somebody breaks a bone or gets into a car accident or whatever, and all the downstream effects. Because the immune system's job is to not allow pathogens to kill us and to repair things. That's its job. And also the last one is to identify cancer cells and kill them before they kill us. But mainly that's the job. But now when you add with leaky gut, which we'll talk about in a second, and things that have never, ever been seen by the immune system before that we're making with all the new chemicals for keeping food tasting like this when it's actually not that, or prolonging its shelf life. We've never seen those things before. And, we're supposed to develop tolerance, which is, yeah, I've seen that before. I saw that one, a day after you were born when you were crawling around in your crib or whatever. So I'm good with that. I'm happy with that. Or foods that you start to eat early in life. But now we've introduced so many new things that our immune system can't handle them. And so it starts to go after these things and starts making mistakes. And some of them, like mercury, can bind to our own tissue, and now it makes a completely new, substance that's not normally seen by the immune system. And so it gets going. And so you start activating the immune system, and you may not like what you get once that thing gets activated.
Yep, absolutely. And I really love what you were saying about, now that we have chemicals and we've had the pathogens before, but, and that immune tolerance sometimes that we're hoping that we're going to get, we're not getting it, and I particularly like to tell all our people to be cautious with introducing so many new substances to their body. I was at a lecture, and the doctor speaking mentioned that 70% of all cancers are food induced, right? So, I mean, and if we think about it for a second, is it the food itself, or is it all the chemicals we're putting on the food? So the food has a longer shelf life, the food tastes better, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's something that we need to be conscious of. It's not only about picking up that.
Let me get rid of that.
No problem. It just adds some more entertainment to it.
So anyhow, it's funny because I like to read, and there was an article that I couldn't pull down, but the article was from Time. It just came out this morning, which the dangers in farm salmon.
Oh, yeah.
Salmon.
Right.
And I have an idea of what it's going to be, but the idea of, well, salmon, farm's cheaper, and so I might as well get farm salmon. And this had three main problems. I didn't get to the meat of the article, but I don't eat farm salmon. I just don't. I'm very careful what I put in my mouth now. I mean, really careful. And I think it's helped my overall health a lot.
Absolutely. At home, we just had a baby. Our first baby. He's actually a month
Yeah,
old
by
today.
the way, congratulations.
Thanks. I'm a little
Yeah.
sleep deprived, but I'm a pretty high energy guy. Well, I'll get through it. And I can't tell you since he's born, I was already pretty picky with this, but the soaps, we've changed soaps, we've changed even the shower that we're, the filters in the shower itself. Um, Everything. I'm not trying to be that guy, right, that sits down at the restaurant and is asking for the gluten free, and I'm not trying to be that person,
Right.
the annoying person. But at the same time, we're living in a day and age that we have to pay attention to what we're putting in our body. And at home, we're shopping pretty much in farms. I'm in Miami, so we go to down south, and or kind of mid Florida there. There's a lot of good farm food, and that's what we're doing. Just to make sure what we're eating, all the way from our eggs to the, whatever is higher quality. And that's we're not trying to have an upheaval of these, like we were saying before, physical triggers of immune response that can come all the way from the soaps you're using, right? It could come all the way from these farm salmon, from a bunch of different things, right? So
Yeah.
and that leads me to a next point. I always like to tell people it's a little bit of an extreme thought, but I always like to tell people, look, your body was designed to know pretty much everything it consumes. What do you think about that? Because there's when you're in putting in all these foreign substances, there are the docs and the scientists who'll say, no, you'll get immune tolerance, but does it look like we're getting immune tolerance? If you look at our like at us globally, no, we're sicker by we're sicker by the day. Yeah, sure, we're not dying with the bubonic plague, but we're dying with all the numbers of cancers, and I think the latest number that I know of autoimmune diseases, I think there's around 129 now documented autoimmune diseases, and the numbers just keeps going up. So, what's your thoughts on we're designed to really just put in our body what our body will recognize?
I think the proof is in the pudding, which is if you take these people from areas that, quote, of the world aren't so developed,
Oh yes.
they do well. They may have infectious diseases, which we don't, which we're pretty good at the vaccines, I guess, and that sort of thing. But they don't get these autoimmune diseases and Alzheimer's disease very much, and these neurodegenerative things. But that same person with those same genetics moves to a Western country and starts living a Western lifestyle. It's not that long before their statistics are just the same as people who grew up in the Western culture versus, in other areas. So the proof is obviously that's the difference because their lifestyles changed and what they put in their bodies changed. And now they got all this chronic illness that all the rest of us have that live in Western cultures. So something must change. And we do immune, tolerance by basically, we're immune tolerant to our own tissue before we're ever born. We parade most of ourselves, parts of ourselves through the immune system and go, do you recognize this? Yeah, I'm really excited about recognizing it. I'm going to get all excited and go after it. Okay, you commit suicide. You're never having kids. And so we do all that before we're ever born when we're in utero. And then once we, come out, we hopefully will have a good, tolerance for our own tissue, which happened before we were born. And now the question is, what are we bringing in that we have never seen before? And so that's the reason why people talk about giving your kid a diverse diet of lots of different kinds of clean, but lots of different kinds of foods, letting your kids play outside in the dirt and so forth, because you better have them see it when they're young, when they go, yeah, no, I'm used to that. I know that. I'm not really upset about that. Versus, gee, I grew up in an atmosphere with a nanny and they used to give me a shower every 5 minutes and so forth, and I never played in the grass. Now everything is new. And now once you stimulate that immune system, I'm telling you, that's what all this stuff with the vaccinations, and I'm not a vaxxer, anti-vaxxer, and so forth, but you never quite know what you're going to get when you activate the immune system. You hope that it's good, but you're never quite sure. And that's the scary part about keeping that system jacked up all the time. And the other is, if you bring in things that you're not used to, and they get processed either because you have leaky gut or you've never eaten that food before, or whatever, now you start to develop an immune reaction to it and you make antibodies. And the problem with the antibodies, which, I'm always scared that God's going to strike me dead, but basically is that they're not very smart. And two things don't have to look that much alike for the immune system antibodies to go, oh, that's Fred. No, that's Joe. That's what that's not Fred, the guy you were made for. That's Joe. Well, he sort of looks like Fred. And so I'm just going to call him Fred and go over and shake his hand and say, how you doing, Fred? Until he says, I'm not Fred. So that's the problem. The more antibodies you create, the more they have a chance to make mistakes. So if you said to somebody, would you rather have more antibodies in your system or less? It's less. You don't want all those, antibodies, floating around to things that you just introduced, because they're subject to make a mistake and maybe go after another food, but they may well go after your own tissue and cause immunity.
Yeah, and right there, basically, you were talking about cross reactivity and so forth, and
Correct.
And I really like the elucidation, with the Fred. I might take that one from you.
I always tell them, that the families that have a lot of autoimmune disease, obviously something's not working or they wouldn't be attacking their own tissue. And frequently, so I'll just say, I hate to tell you this, but your immune system is not a Harvard graduate. And they go, oh, some are real rich and, they go, don't say that. I go, I'm just telling you, a Harvard graduate should be able to distinguish one thing from the other, but your immune system's not very good at it, obviously, because lots of people have autoimmunity in your family. So their recognition mechanism must not be that great.
Right. And for people out there, we both went to medical school, and these are not topics, because lots of times people think that we learn these things in school. Maybe some of the principles, and before we were online, Dr. Engelman and I were talking about, for example, most people have heard of rheumatic fever, where the body reacts to attacks a streptococcal type species of bacteria, and then down the line the person's going to have other symptoms because of the immunological response the body has mounted to that bacteria. But this extrapolates to other things too, to foods, to all these physical triggers of immune response. So we'll keep saying this, these physical triggers of immune response. It's really interesting to understand this. And now let's talk a little bit about the defense system of the body, what is the mucosa, right? A lot of times the immune system is very dependent on the mucosa, right? And I like to give people a very simple definition, but I'm curious to see how you would explain mucosa to and the importance in this whole war the immune system has with these foreign substances in our body.
It's a war, and you got these. You can't blame a herpes virus for coming in and trying to take over, or corona. They're not mean. It's just their job. Right. It's like, you want to have kids, they want to have kids. Their job is to pass their RNA or DNA down. That's their mission. The problem is by fulfilling that mission, they may well kill us. And so we have to be very careful about, take a guess how old the herpes virus family is, particularly Epstein-Barr. How old do you think that virus is?
Epstein-Barr is herpes 5, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Epstein-Barr is herpes 4.
Oh, 4, sorry. CMV is 5.
But anyhow, how old do you think that? How long do you think that virus has been around? You'll
I'm
never.
not. I'm not sure.
400 million years.
Wow.
Is it a wonder that it's so good at its job? It's been here 400 million years.
Wow.
So when we develop our immune system, what's one of the things that the innate immune system, the one we're born with, what does it go after? One of the receptors is viruses. Why? Because they'll kill us if they take over. So, the key is to keep the outside world out and not let it in the inside world, which is the immune system, but more actually the bloodstream, and then the bloodstream takes it to all these different tissues and so forth. And how do we do that? Well, the main way we do it is the mucosa, which is it's a semi-permeable structure, which does let some things in, but keeps big things out and makes its decision about what gets in and what stays out. And that is what we use. And then our immune system, particularly in the gut, what is it, 70, 80% of the immune system sits right on the other side of that single cell, which separates what's in the gut from what's underneath that membrane. And no wonder, because where do you get most of your stuff from? What you eat and what you swallow. But that's present in the gut. It's present in the oral cavity. It's present in the nose. It's present in the sinuses. It's present in tears and in the eyes, urinary tract. Any place that anything that wants to climb in and kill us was trying to be prevented from getting in. While in the meantime, with the gut, those cells still have to allow nutrients to get in. So they have a big job and a complicated job. So it's a interesting barrier, and all of them are the same pretty much, in that those cells are specific, but they're not butted up against one another. So there's no space in between, because there is some space in between to let smaller molecules get in and out, like oxygen and carbon dioxide and so forth. But those are part of that, what's called the barrier, which has tight junctions, and then the cell itself to keep things from getting in. And therein lies the problem. If that's disturbed, then now you got things coming in, whether it's food or undigested food or pathogens or chemicals or toxins or whatever. Now they're in the house. They were supposed to stay out of the house. Now they're in the house. Now you got to figure out what you're going to do about it. That's why leaky gut, which is another question, but what people are talking about is such a big deal. And it's one of the great tests that Dr. Boshtani helped develop in Cyrex that is really revolutionary, as far as I'm concerned, for diagnosing people that don't feel well. Or are you healthy and are you subject to getting something happening down the way, including neurodegenerative disease? So that's a critical one as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So what is exactly leaky gut, and is it true that Cyrex pioneered the leaky gut studies in the U.S.?
Dr. Vojtani and Cyrex supposedly did, and have a patent on it, because I cleared it with the maestro last night before I made a statement like that. But it's not that big of a surprise, because Dr. Vojtani is one of the probably 3 or 4 giants in this area. And he's been writing about these things and studying these things for, I don't know how many years, but it's a fair number, and he's amazing how many publications he has. And so he's the brains behind Cyrex, and that's why I love working with this lab, because he's just brilliant.
Yeah, and I love working with you guys just because of that scientific print you guys have left, and how deep you guys go into this in comparison to other labs. So, but I got a lot of people asking me about leaky gut. and it pops up in various conversations, and people are like, oh, what is it, and what does it cause, and is it true I could get really tired? Is it true that it's the gateway to all the autoimmunity? Is it that I've heard things from all autoimmunity starts at the gut barrier? I've heard things of psychiatric diseases connected to leaky gut. So demystify that a little bit for us, Dr. Engelman. So what is leaky gut, and what can it cause, and what can it lead to?
Leaky gut is that barrier that's not keeping things out that don't belong on the other side. And it can happen for two main reasons. Number one, the cells, like I said, are not butted up against one another. There's space there, not a lot, but enough. And there are bridges which bridge that space. One of them, the one that's probably the most important, and also the one that seems to get the most damage when things go wrong, is called the tight junction. And it's like a bridge. I mean, if you think about it as a bridge, it can get damaged, and once it gets damaged, then you got a hole in the gut. I call it a holy gut, but not in the best, not in the best religious sense, but and then everything that goes by up above is subject to drop through the hole. Undigested food, chemicals, bacteria, viruses, whatever, just drops through the hole. That's there's no magic. It's just a hole, and they go by, including toxins or parts of organisms that are ridiculously inflammatory, which is this one called lipopolysaccharides. So, and that usually happens. So now you got two things. One, well, I got leaky gut because my tight junction's damaged. So what am I going to do about it? Well, one is I got to fix it, but if I don't fix the thing that's damaging it, it'll just keep getting damaged again, and I'll keep bringing cement or whatever, and it'll just get damaged. So you got to come up with the reasons why that might happen. And there are, three of them. Gluten antibodies is probably the main one on the foods, and then dysbiosis of having a gut that has, overgrowth of the wrong bacteria in it, which is the natural state of things, by the way, is that colon is like, organisms love it. I mean, they love it down there. And they're all fighting for, I don't know why it doesn't appeal to me, but it seems to appeal to them quite a bit. And so they're all looking for more territory so they can get more food. Well, usually they cancel each other out and go, no, you guys stay over here, you guys come over here, and everybody will be happy. But we don't eat the foods that supply us with the soldiers, the good soldiers necessarily, who are going to go, hey, you guys are getting a little out of hand. You need to go back to your area again, which is in probiotics, the gram positives, and in some foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and so forth and so on. So we get overgrown, and that is one of the causes, because it's so inflammatory, or can be, that damages the bridge. So we have to look and see, I have a damaged bridge. Did gluten, cause it? Antibodies cause it? I better find out. What are the tests for gluten antibodies, which is one of Cyrex's, or is it this, this dysbiosis with overgrown stuff that's not supposed to be overgrown, or maybe it's both. So you got to look for those. And then the third one is stress. Those are the three most common reasons for tight junction. Now that's the area between the cells. That's the most common. And then there is, the cell itself, the enterocyte, that's doing all this great stuff, that's, bringing in stuff I need and keeping stuff I don't out. That now is being damaged, and that's much, much more significant. And that means the whole mechanism's falling apart, not just in between, but the cells are falling apart. And that usually is caused by inflammatory bowel disease, things like celiac, untreated celiac, or real bad celiac sensitivity, occasionally another food, but rarely, or some other autoimmune disease. And when I see that's much more significant, takes longer to heal and so forth. But what it says is, I've got stuff now, it's like an open party. Everything that wants to get in is now getting in.
Right.
And you got to address that. And so And the way the immune system works is, do you think the immune system knows that undigested, I don't know, soy or rice is undigested soy or rice? No. It just, I don't know what this is. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a pathogen. It's going to kill me. So I'm going to go after that exactly the same way that I would go after bacteria or a parasite, because that's all I do. I'm smart, but I'm not that smart. And so I have one way of going after things that I don't recognize, and that's assuming that it'll kill me. So it doesn't, so when people go, well, you're have antibodies to whatever, your rice or eggs or whatever, the antibody basically is going after that for whatever reason as if it were a pathogen, because that's how we do things.
Right. And that's interesting. And for everybody to take that last line that you said home, these antibodies go after these things as if they were pathogens. They're not playing around. Your immune system is upset and it's ready to take some people out of business. And sometimes take yourself out of business and you start an autoimmune disease, and that's not what you want, right? So leaky gut can get you kind of, I've seen a lot of articles on fatigue, a lot of articles on autoimmunity. I mean, leaky gut can lead to an array of things, even on the mental illness side, et cetera. It's kind of a gateway or barriers, right? A lot of our barriers, and I mean, we can extrapolate this then to the blood-brain barrier, et cetera.
I'll tell you a quick funny story is that it turns out that we have gram-negative organisms, which is just a name for a microbe, a bacteria, in our normal, microbiome in our gut. They're not pathological. They're there. They're part of it. Right? All of them have a particular thing on the outside wall structurally of those. I can just tell you that in my experience, I have pronounced more people dead from gram-negative infections than I like to even think about, because they kill you, okay? And so if I know it, the immune system knows it. So over all these thousands or millions of years. So it, when we're born, has a receptor for that particular thing that's on the outside of all gram-negative organisms. And when that gets through, so they live and they die and, and they have this trash that's part of it. Well, that should go out in the stool because I have an intact gut barrier. It's not going to get in my immune system. But so I'm not worried about it. But what if it does? What if it does? By however way it gets in there. Now all of a sudden your immune system goes, wow, we got gram-negative stuff that's close at hand, that's ready to invade, because if this got through, they'll get through and they will kill me. And so I got to get ready. And how do I get ready? I get my whole inflammatory mechanism ginned up to basically go, I'll do the best I can. I am ready for you. The problem is once you open up that inflammation to get rid of those things, now you have all that stuff floating around, and it is so damaging and causes so many problems. And it turns out that once that's activated, it makes certain signalers that basically tell other parts of the immune system what to do. And the signaler can get into an intact brain, get across that barrier, that blood-brain barrier, which is supposed to be impermeable practically. But it isn't to those three things that are made by LPS that gets from the gut into the immune system. And when they're active and they get into the brain, they immediately go to the cells that make inflammatory products. So now by definition, you have an inflamed brain. An inflamed brain can be everything from chronic fatigue syndrome to peripheral neuropathies to depression to anxiety and so forth. So one of the things I always say is my sister's a psychiatrist, and I always say if I were a psychiatrist, and obviously people are coming for behavioral problems, I would get an array too, which is the Cyrex array for permeability, but more important to me, LPS in the immune system on every single patient that came through the door. because if that's positive, LPS antibodies, you're sick. I don't know how sick you are, but you're sick, and some people are really sick. And a
Right.
lot of people think that that's probably may well be one of the triggers for neurodegenerative disease, and I'm one of them that believes that.
I agree. I agree. And I've seen a lot of these LPS positives, and I can actually, in my mind, correlate it to some people that, we've seen, and it does correlate highly with everything you're saying. So I'm right there with you. So um, kind of shifting gears here a little bit. So getting a little bit more granular, a lot of people confuse cross reactivity with polyreactivity. What is it? I really like that Fred example he gave. So explain the difference between Fred, Dick, and Harry on, if you can, with
Yeah,
why
cross reactivity is I looked at you, you sort of look like what I'm made for, and I'm not smart enough to basically know the difference, so I'm going to stick to you, even though I'm not made for you, but it's close enough.
right,
Uh, that's cross reactivity or molecular mimicry, very similar things. I'm looking at these different molecules that make this up. Like if you look at a protein, proteins are basically look like a pearl necklace, sort of when they're made.
right,
And the pearls are amino acids. And they have, this amino acids here and this different ones over here. And that is thyroid peroxidase or myelin or whatever it is. And you make an antibody, and the antibody goes and looks at that and the antibody's made to gluten, for instance. And that antibody looks at thyroid peroxidase, that little 10 amino acids, go, wow, 3 of these are the same as gluten. So I'm not the smartest, antibody in the world, so I'm going to stick to that. Next thing you know, you got Hashimoto's disease.
right.
That antibody's not too bright, and they don't have to look that much alike. Supposedly 30%, that's 3 out of the 10 amino acids is the sort of the minimum amount that you need to have an antibody get confused. Now, some it takes more than that, but that's 30% the same. That's not that hard. There's a lot of things look a lot alike. And so that's cross reactivity.
Right.
And it could be to anything. It could be to another food. It could be a pathogen because, we're live things. So we don't look that much different from one thing to another. So when you break them down, so that's that. Molecular mimicry is a set of antibodies which now have just been recently elucidated that come from an entirely different cell that makes antibodies. That's now called a B1 cell. That it looks like everybody has it at birth, and it makes these crazy antibodies that aren't very strong and don't seem to cause a lot of problem, but are described as promiscuous, which is the perfect description. They can bind to anything they bump into, just like a promiscuous person, and they'll go home, with that person. But if that person asks them to get married, or here's my ring, I'm not interested in a long-term relationship. So, and so they're incrementally better when we're born than nothing, but they're not like a normal antibody. And then those B1 cells, as soon as we develop adaptive immunity, go away in days, hours to days, and we're not polyreactive anymore because the B1 cells go away. But about 3% of people, I think it's more than that, seem to reactivate B1 cells for whatever reason, and now all of a sudden they're polyreactive again. So they get one of these food panels that comes back, and the person, wants to commit suicide because they can't eat anything, right? Because 80% of the foods are positive. So, but they're really pretty benign. But the key is, why do I reactivate my B1 cells? And nobody knows specifically the answer, but I believe it's some chronic thing that you're trying to get rid of. And it seems like mold is usually part of that because it's a biofilm, it's hard to get rid of, it makes mycotoxins. And I believe, and I'm going to working on a paper to write this, that the immune system goes, man, I can't get rid of those mycotoxins. I hate those things, and I've tried everything that I have in my armamentarium to do. Oh, that's right, I have those B1 cells. I forgot about those. I haven't called those guys since I was born, and then it wakes them up. They make these polyreactive antibodies, but the antibodies aren't the problem. The problem is what the underlying issue is for polyreactive antibodies. And if I'm right, it turns out that it's not common, but it's not uncommon for people with COVID to show up with polyreactive antibodies, which supports my theory of, man, I'm trying to get rid of this and I'm trying everything I can. And so I'm going to call these B1 cells up again. I don't know how good they are, but I'll give them a go. So I think I'm right about this. I'm pretty sure I've looked at more of these than anybody in the world by, I hate to say what factor it is, but it's a lot.
Right. I know you have. And I've seen some of these tests too, where the person has COVID, and while they do the test, and they come back polyreactive to chemicals and so forth,
Yeah.
or where there's a mold like Stachybotrys, right, black mold, and then their food panel is all upside down, and they're like, I can't eat anything. I'm like, relax, let's take off the first 20. I'm like, and we'll play this little, do this in parts. So, what's your thoughts between psychosocial stressors and an overactive immune system? So, stress, and most namely distress, right? Because we have eustress and distress, and you kind of play a role in how you see stress in your life. But what's your thoughts on how that impacts the immune system?
Well, I'll give you something I just read today from NIH, right? So what it says is, let's talk about stress and stress research. But when stress persists, chronic stress, it can lead to both mental and physical health problems. In fact, long-standing evidence from multiple areas of research demonstrates chronic stress acts like a toxin, permeating our organs and cells and triggering a negative cascade on our hormones, sleep, muscles, metabolism, immune system, and inflammatory response. And chronic systemic inflammation is emerging as a key factor underlying more than a half of all deaths from chronic disease, including heart disease, cancer, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And that just came out this morning from NIH. That's how critical stress is.
Right. I before the call, I was talking to you about that. I just recorded a lecture talking about how I correlated adrenal fatigue with the thymus gland. I'm a big fan of talking about the thymus gland, which is pretty much programs your T cells. It's connected to your whole lymphatics. I mean, it's an awesome gland that gets very little attention. And when you're in stress, right, or I always like to give the example of the lion, the caveman man with the lion. Before, I mean, we would just have to go hunt some food and go back to our cave, and lights went out, and no cell phones, no emails, no bringing back work from back to the house. And nowadays that line comes in the form of an email, comes in the form of a boss that's calling you late at night and bothering you or whatever it is, and we don't shut off. And those stressors, it tends to put the mind, instead of the front of the mind where we're creative and so forth, in the back of the mind, survival mode. And our immune system, that thymus gland, starts to downregulate, and it's actually involuting as we're aging, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of anti-aging theories, regenerative medicine, sit around the rejuvenation of the thymus gland, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty, the mechanisms are actually not that hard to understand, where the adrenal gland is so ramped up, and then where our mind, again, we're in that back of the mind running from that lion, and where we really start to suffer, where the immune system, just your body wants to survive. It does not care if, hey, I'm going to develop an autoimmune disease. No, your body's just in survival mode. and we start to see these things develop then in disease and breakdown of like the barriers, like we were saying, leaky gut, et cetera. So it's really important that people understand not only stress management, but also things I like to tell people, like get 2 cell phones, and one's for work, one's for home, and limit the number of people that have the other number. And I actually do this. I have 2 cell phones, and if I'm feeling a little overwhelmed or with phone fatigue or whatever it is, I get home and just put this one down, and then my mom, my wife, my dad, my attorney, and my assistant have the number to the other one. So that's about it.
That's a smart idea.
I do
Really
that all. To tell you the truth, that's the only way I can study. When I have to study for longer periods of time, I can't be close to my phone. So I've been doing this for quite some time. I've had 2 phones, and I can't shut it off. And as you know me pretty well, it's not hard to make me talk. So you tell me, say hi, I'm going to say a lot right after that. So it's a trap for myself, to tell you the truth. So, and
it's a nice quality, by the way.
I appreciate that. My wife will tell you different, but so sometimes she's like, "Jesus, the battery doesn't end." I'm like, "Nah, it's still going." I'm a happy guy. That's really, I think, a huge key of keeping your immune system, down regulated and and making life easier to get through. Right? Just smile and be happy.
The way I would look at it is, there's nothing magic about this. We're a machine.
Right.
And if you keep running that machine on highest gear over and over and don't turn it off for a while, it's going to blow. It's not going to work anymore. It's just going to break down and not work. So you'll get your, high norepinephrine and your high cortisol and your, and so forth and so on, and get those stress things cranked up. But then eventually you either will stop making them because you're worn out, or your receptors, which are the ones that have to carry out the duty when the cortisol hits, will just go, I'm done. You can send me all, it's like insulin resistance. How much glucose are you going to show me, for over and over again? Knock on the door, let the glucose, eventually I go, I'm just not going to open the door anymore. You're driving me crazy with all that sugar.
Right.
And that's insulin resistance. Those are receptors that have to do the job of whatever's being presented, whether it's cortisol or norepinephrine or adrenaline. And turns out now, because immunology is going so fast and so cool, it turns out that essentially all immune cells have receptors for neurotransmitters. Nobody knew that before. If somebody says, no, if you're making a lot of neurotransmitter, guess one of the places it's going to end up is your immune cell. Now, it may make it better, but it may make it worse. So everything, I think the big takeaway message that I learned for stem cell medicine is everything is related to everything. You cannot, it's like the cardiologist that goes, well, I don't know anything about, gastroenterology. Well, I'm a cardiologist. Well, unfortunately, the body doesn't work that way. They're all connected. So you better learn how the connection works, because otherwise you won't be very good at your job.
I always talk about that, the compartmentalization of the compartment of the you specialize in so much that you're so specialized, pretty much you're specialized in nothing.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's that is a problem. And just as a last question, I know we definitely went a little overboard on time, but last question I want to ask you. What's your thoughts of this really cool area that I see is growing, which is Psychoneuro Immunology? So psycho, for people who never heard this, psycho, neuro, nervous system, immunology, and all the coming together of these 3 areas, which I see very, very valid. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a huge deal, and it basically just supports what we were just talking about. Is you can't isolate these things, and I'll give you an example. If you take a bacteria and put it over here in a beaker or whatever, and you take an immune cell over here from somebody who's healthy and happy and so forth, and then you take the same pathogen and put it over here and take the same immune cell but from somebody who is deeply depressed, and see how long it takes that immune cell to get from one side of the beaker to the other and attack that pathogen. And the difference between the two is remarkable, how much slower the depressed immune cell is to get over there and kill that pathogen.
That's profound. Yep. Yep.
So it obviously has an effect on the immune system. So all of that, and the thing of it is Dr. Vostani's been talking lately about this, it's this some and this some and this some. This is the exposome. We were just talking about it yesterday. And the exposome is a conglomeration of everything in your environment that you've experienced since you were conceived, right?
Right.
Like if your parents argue all the time, part of your exposome is what went on while you were in the uterus with all these things that your mom was making that end up, bathing your cells and so forth. But it's a conglomeration, an additive conglomeration of everything you've experienced in your life. And it's pretty fascinating about how they interact with one another, but it's all of our exposures in our entire life, including just after we conceived. And it maybe even have to do with the sperm and the egg even before we were conceived. That's how wild this stuff is now with epigenetics and everything, right?
Yes, absolutely. So stinking thinking can make you sick, guys.
Great. I like that.
Stinking thinking can definitely make you sick. That's I was dying to say that, because it's
a good one.
So yeah, it is all the exposures and so forth. But as you're I want to definitely end up on an upbeat and happy note. Like, is your cup half full or half empty? Because even your immune system is depending on how you see that darn cup of yours in your life. So you got to make sure that you have a positive outlook in life, and you keep that stress and turn some of that distress into eustress, and focus on just being happy, because your immune system will appreciate that, and so will the other guys that your immune system we're getting ready to attack, right? So
yeah, I think the key is to focus on what you have and not what you don't have.
Exactly.
And so and that is sort of the way to look at it, because everybody's got good stuff and things that aren't quite so good. It's the weight that you give them in your everyday activities that makes the difference. But you guys are doing a great service. And I don't say that. I might tell somebody they look nice or something, but I'm not a big compliment guy unless it's true. And you guys, I'm really proud of what you've done, and you deserve your success. So you keep it up.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much, coming from somebody that's been mentoring me in years ahead of me in this game. So I really, really appreciate those words from the bottom of my heart. And I just wanted to thank you for blessing us with your presence today. This, infinite knowledge that you have in this subject and various in medicine, and always with great energy. So thank you so much, Dr. Engelman, for your time with us today. And viewers out there, make sure you go to the Cyrix.com's website to understand a little bit better what they do. You can come to our website, our Instagram, social media. Make sure to follow us, ask us questions. I plan on doing this again with Dr. Engelman. So we're going to know what you guys want to hear depending on the questions you ask us. So leave us some comments and questions, and we'll be sure to get back to you guys, okay? And again, Dr. Engelman, thank you so much for your time today with us. Very, very grateful.
My pleasure.
All right. All right, everybody. So you guys have the rest of a great day. And remember, no stinking thinking. Your immune system needs you to be positive. Let's go, guys. All right. Have a good one.